So we know that certain landmarks and cornerstones of the ancient world follow the balance of power as it shifts around the planet. The most obvious examples are the entrance to Olympus, the tunnel to the underworld, the door of Orpheus, and a few others, which are all directly related to the gods themselves. In the Trials of Apollo, however, we find out that certain mortal structures can be deified, such as the Tomb of Tarquin, the last king of Rome, and the Trials of Apollo series actually gives us a lot more insight into how structures and even people can be immortalized. Several Roman emperors like Nero and Caligula were remembered by humanity to such a degree that they basically became minor gods, which leaves us to wonder what other structures from the ancient world were immortalized by human memory and which of them might have made their way over to the United States. If the tomb of Rome's last king is important enough to be preserved, then we believe that one of the most important archives of the history of the ancient world is actually sitting right here under our noses. Is it possible that the Library of Alexandria, as far as the Percy Jackson universe is concerned, survived and is currently hidden somewhere in the West? In real-life history, we know that the ancient civilizations were no strangers to archives like this, but most cultures founded their libraries with the intention of preserving their own history. They were very religiously based institutions that were built as a fingerprint for the ancient society, but the Greeks had another idea. They were impressed by the achievements of their neighbors, and as they began to expand their territory, philosophers like Plato and Herodotus became infatuated with the cultures of the New World. So, the Library of Alexandria was designed as the world's first global center to collect all known cultures of the time. Kingdoms around the world would venture to Alexandria and Egypt to contribute their own historical and scientific findings, and while they were there, they could learn about the wider world. In the Percy Jackson universe, there is no shortage of potential for the kinds of stories and discoveries that might be found in the Alexandrian archive, especially since we know that the gods themselves have eons of stories to tell and lore to explore. The Greeks were surprisingly advanced, and were the most revered pioneers of astronomy and cartography, so adding the gods' own experiences to the library means that the modern Library of Alexandria could be the world's largest hub of information, which brings up the question, where is it? If it survived, and it is in the United States, then let's see how we can track it down. First, we need to understand how locations migrate, and it usually has something to do with the cultural significance of the original site. The entrance to Olympus was originally the mountain itself, which represented the strongest pillar of endurance and godhood in the ancient world. There was no mightier structure than Mount Olympus, so when it moved to the United States, the gods chose a center of cultural power. We don't know where it was when the gods were in England, but they specifically chose the Empire State Building because New York is the most powerful city in the West, and the Empire State Building is the strongest pillar of strength within the strongest city in the world. We also know that there was a stark division between the Greek and Roman camps, with the Greeks in the east and the Romans in the west, which loosely reflects the history of both empires. The Greeks stretched further to the east, reaching as far as modern-day India, while Rome made its way all the way to the Iberian Peninsula and through parts of modern-day England. So what do we know about the original Library of Alexandria, and how can we use this to narrow down our search? We know that Alexandria is a coastal city in the east known for welcoming travelers and voyagers, and that the library itself is the greatest collection of knowledge and information in the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria was actually part of a larger structure, a full museum that's not just books and writings, but artifacts and items from surrounding cultures. The Museum of Alexandria dates back to the 3rd century BCE as the main body of Alexandrian research and discovery, and in the United States, one site seems to describe the library perfectly. So let's take a trip to Washington, D.C., specifically the Library of Congress. Home to over 32 million cataloged books in almost 500 different languages, the Library of Congress is the largest physical archive in the world, with writings dating back as far as passages from the Buddhist Sutra, estimated to be from around the year 770 AD. But when we take into account carvings and artifacts, we can also talk about the cuneiform tablets that go back to before the year 2000 BC, firmly within the domain of ancient Greece. The world's largest library sits less than 2 miles from the Smithsonian Museum, which Percy actually visited during the Titan's Curse. We know that Percy and the Hunters encounter Atlas in the Air and Space Museum, and when he plants the first set of dragon's teeth, a few small cats grow out of the soil. Atlas gets angry and asks the guard where he got the teeth, to which he replies, the saber-toothed tiger. Atlas tells him that this is wrong and that the T-Rex will grow skeletal warriors, which proves that the Smithsonian is housing ancient artifacts from the tale of Cadmus. As a brief rundown on the story of Cadmus, he was the founding king of Thebes, who was directed by the oracle to follow a cow until it dropped from exhaustion, and to build a kingdom wherever it lay. When he did this, he found that he was on a plot of land not far from a cave, where a dragon sacred to Ares had made its home. And since Cadmus knew he could not build a kingdom so close to a dragon lair, he decided to slay the beast. When he pulled the teeth from the dragon, he planted them into the soil and watered them with blood, to grow the same crop of skeletal warriors that we see in the Titan's Curse. This seems to imply that the T-Rex is actually a skeleton of a mighty dragon, merely shrouded by the mist, and that the Smithsonian is home to several artifacts from other Greek stories and myths. If Atlas specifically came here to arm himself and collect weapons for his fight against Olympus, then it makes perfect sense that just 2 miles down the road would be the lost Library of Alexandria. Is it possible that Percy and the hunters were in the backyard of the single greatest hub of science and history in existence, and they had no idea? We know that in the staff of Serapis, that Serapis himself was attempting to reconstruct the lighthouse of Alexandria, and the entire crossover saga between Percy, Annabeth, and the Canes follows the journey of Ptolemy and his conquest of Egypt. He began to blend the cultures and create new gods, but at no point do we see any reference to the library or museum of Alexandria, implying that they don't need to be reconstructed because Serapis may already know that they've moved. If so, then there's no telling what else might lie within the walls of the Library of Congress, and how many ancient secrets are being shrouded from mortal eyes by the mist. The oldest culture that has been depicted in the Percy Jackson universe so far is the dawn of Egypt, and prehistoric Egypt ended around 5,000 years ago, giving way for the Egyptian Empire as we know it in the Kane Chronicles. When we take into account all of the history depicted and alluded to in the Kane Chronicles, and combine it with all of Greek and Roman history, then there's no telling how much might be hidden in DC, if this theory holds weight. At some point in the future, we'd love to see Riordan's take on the Library of Alexandria, and we believe that this is the perfect groundwork for the story to be built. But that's just our personal theory. Let us know what you guys think, because we love this series, we love talking about the series, and we would love to welcome you into the conversation. Take care, friends, keep reading, obey the gods, and have a good one.